lot of talk. A lot of talk out there. Are things as good as they've ever been? Are they as bad as they've ever been? Is there a great big canyon between that? Well, as you know, we've been on the road a lot, and so I bring you some good news tonight. Late kick, high atop Blacksburg, Virginia. We're at Virginia Tech. We've been here all day. We're going to have Brent on the show for a lengthy conversation about a number of different things. It is Thursday, March 28th, the year of our Lord 2024, but I bring you a question tonight. How do you think college football's faring right now? I know there's a lot of doom and gloom type scenarios out there. I know a lot of things are unsettled, and I know some of you may be concerned about the sport that you love the most if you're anything like me. I'm not saying don't be concerned. I'm going to tell you things are probably not nearly as bad as some headlines make them out to be, and I've done a fair amount of digging on that front as I've been on the road. So I'm going to talk to you about that. I got a bunch of first-year head coaches all over the country, some in better position than others, and I'm going to tell you which are which. And as I said, we're going to have Brent on the show tonight, and I think you're going to really enjoy that conversation because I don't think outside of maybe Virginia Tech, Penn State obviously, and just ACC circles, you know enough about him. Really interesting dude. Really layered personality, and we're going to introduce him to you tonight. A lot of you, at least. They're watching us in Richmond, Virginia, Colorado Springs, Colorado, Valdosta, Georgia, New Orleans, Louisiana. There has been a ton of behind-the-scenes views, content, etc. over on the Instagram channel at Late Kick Josh. I don't have time to put it in the show. That's where you can find it. I got my handy-dandy, rest in peace, Pac-12 Pate championship notebook here that I use on the road. So let's dive into the show tonight. Brent in about 20-25 minutes. So, college football right now and college football's future, there's a lot of consternation and debate out there about what state the sport is in. And of course, when you can't see around the corner, sometimes you have a proclivity to fear the worst. And if I can't see around the corner, if it's foggy, or in our case, in college football, if conferences are realigning, if a couple of conferences seem to be dwarfing the others, if NIL and the portal seem really out of control and I'm uncomfortable as a fan and these players feel like mercenaries and a lot of coaches move around, it feels like a mercenary sport. Where's the tradition? Where's the spirit? Well, that's not a really fun way to think, although I myself have been guilty of saying at least some of those things lately. But I do want you to rest assured tonight, in the interest of having a very happy show, heading into a happy Easter weekend, sports in a pretty good spot, guys. It is not immune to maybe some self-inflicted damage, but the sport's in a really good spot. But if you don't believe me, I'm going to give you my reasons, okay? Number one, when we go on the road in the fall, we meet a lot of people. When we go on the road in the spring, we meet a ton more people. It's a relaxed setting. You can get in town for multiple days. You're talking not just to coaches and athletic directors, but you're talking to people in communications departments. You're talking to people high up in athletics departments. You're talking to people on the broadcast side. Basically, what I'm saying is it's a lot of people who have their hand on the lever. A lot of people who are in either highly influential or in some cases outright decision-making roles. You hear about the bad ones. There are a ton of really good folks in college athletics. And maybe at the beginning, when things started to shift, they kind of sat back and said, whoa, what's going on here? Let me stay out of the way. Well, then they realized if they stay out of the way, someone else is going to come in and grab the wheel. And that someone else may not have any business around a college football decision-making role. So what I've experienced and what has been echoed to me by a lot of pretty powerful people in the sport is that time is coming to an end. That time is kind of past. And the folks who you and I, candidly, would have always liked to be in the decision-making positions have sort of started to roll up their sleeves a little bit, and they've sort of gotten after it behind the scenes. You will not see this bear fruit immediately. Just like you didn't see the fruit get poisoned immediately if you don't like the way things are going currently. But there is a lot of urgency. Coaches know it. There's a lot of urgency. Administrators, commissioners in some cases, presidents at universities have a lot of urgency because we're not 1 or 2 miles down a dead-end road. You're several miles down, not too far, certainly not too far, but it's a lot more than a couple of miles. And, you know, if you keep going a little bit further, number one, you could irreparably harm some things that we love. But number two, and this is where I get into the second bucket if you don't believe the first bucket, even if you believe in the heartless, soulless approach of treating college athletics as the mere assets that they are, and even if you believe that it's strictly a bottom line business and let's suck the life out of it, and that's essentially how a lot of you feel like the television executive types think. And I'm not going to tell you some of them don't. Some of them do, some of them don't. But I'm not here to defend these people. I work for them, and I'm not here to defend them. What I will tell you is I talk to them. And some of them, although they would never say, I couldn't care less about the spirit of college sports. Let's just say, for argument's sake, they are the devil reincarnate when it comes to college sports fans. Let's say that's true. Here's what they say. What they say is, we can't damage the asset. We've paid too much money for it. The asset is only worth the billions of dollars that various media organizations are paying if it maintains its maximum value. What does that mean? And this is where it gets really interesting for you guys in Richmond or Valdosta or New Orleans. It means that they need you. Did you notice how I phrased that? You don't need them. They need you. Now, maybe they didn't always realize that, or maybe there was a hubris and sort of an arrogance. You'll always be here. You can't give up football. You won't walk away from football. Well, you walked away from NASCAR. You kind of walked away from pro wrestling. There's no entertainment source in this country or in this world that is immune to bad decision making. They know that. Here's the difference. It's not a lab where you get to experiment with this. You don't experiment with $1.3 billion a year. Nobody does. The richest people on the face of the earth don't do that. And so media organizations don't either, especially when you got folks you have to answer to at the end of the day. They're called shareholders. You have to answer to them. You cannot spend that kind of money on an asset and then participate in activities that damage the asset. So whether you want to believe, like I do, in a lot of good people behind the scenes working for the betterment of college football and college sports overall, again, I believe in that. Whether you want to believe in that or you want to believe that, hey, these people purchased it and couldn't care less about it and it's just a P&L line on a sheet to them, they have to maintain the integrity of it, guys, because otherwise you walk away. And if you walk away, it is bad, bad news for them. So you give it a couple of years, and like I've told you, I think a lot of folks in college athletics right now are kind of holding their breath. A lot of college fans probably holding their breath. You can hold your breath for a little while. Not indefinitely, but a little while. Hold your breath long enough. Saturdays in the fall are still just as pristine as they've always been. When it's Virginia Tech and it's 3rd and 2 and it's early fourth quarter and it's 23-all and you need to convert, those moments feel like they've always felt. No one's thinking about the portal or NIL in that moment. And so as long as we got that, like I've always told you, we got college football. We got a sport. Hold your breath. Give it a couple of years. It's going to take a little while. Folks are going to have to get their hands dirty, but I think those folks are ready to get their hands dirty, and I've been ready, but what can I do? I'm just talking in a microphone. Appreciate you guys being with us. Make sure, if you're here, and I know maybe some Virginia Tech fans are checking out the show for the first time tonight, make sure you do two things. They're both free, and there is no catch. There's no email spam list you get added to. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, which if you're watching, you're on right now, and subscribe to the podcast feed. Those are two different things, and sometimes there's unique content to those specific platforms. All right, let's continue rolling. These first-year head coaches around college football, not every situation is the same. In fact, no two situations are the same. I wanted to talk about new head coaches, which ones are walking into really, really good immediate situations, and which ones have their work cut out for them. This is not a 5-year exploratory exercise where I predict how they'll be in 2029. We're talking about 2024. Kalen DeBoer walked into a really good situation at Alabama. Now, that depends on your viewpoint. You could have the viewpoint that no one wants to follow a legend, and you're right, most don't. The guy that's wired properly does, as long as when that legend walked out, he did not salt the earth in the process. Nick Saban didn't. Trust me, he didn't. They still got a top 10 talent roster there, top 5 talent roster there. Place is immaculate. Every resource you would need to win is at Alabama. And I'm going to go a step further. Now, this is a theory of mine that we're going to have to test. I actually believe Nick Saban being at Alabama meant they did not have to realize their ultimate potential in terms of resource and giving, because Nick Saban was there. And so you got the discount treatment on a lot of things. You got benefit of the doubt on a lot of things. And as a result, I think there's untapped potential in the resource pool at Alabama. Now, that's a theory of mine that we're going to see tested. But you got an A-list head coach there. It is, I think, a top 15 staff that this time next year will be a top 5 national staff. And there is a lot of talent still to work with. Very first world problems Alabama has. And keep in mind, it's about to be April. Portal's about to open up. I think they'll be on the receiving end a whole lot more than the departing end. Brent Brennan, a name that garnered far less headlines than Kalen DeBoer when he came to Alabama. Brent Brennan was at San Jose State. I don't think he ever had more than 7 wins at San Jose State. He went to Arizona. Why are we talking about him? Well, it's because they kept their elite talent. They got a quarterback and a wide receiver out there, each who will garner first-round NFL draft consideration this time a year from now, and they stayed. And everyone, me included, thought they'd probably go off to Washington with Jedd Fisch. They stayed. They are 19th with those guys in preseason S&P Plus, and they are a top 50 team in returning production. And Arizona, as you know, is joining the Big 12, along with Arizona State, along with Colorado, along with Utah. Kind of a sneaky team out there. You see the odds from FanDuel if you're watching on YouTube right now. You see the odds there on the side of your screen to win. You see the over-unders. Really sneaky team because that's a good coaching staff, and it's an underrated coaching staff, very overlooked. Keep an eye on them. Mike Elko at Texas A&M, I think, absolutely belongs on the positive end of this conversation. Here's why I love Elko immediately at Texas A&M. Firstly, he also inherits a top 20 caliber coaching or he inherits a top 20 roster. He gets Texas A&M, which I'll get back to in just a second. He's got a quarterback with a 5-star ceiling in Connor Wigman. I think there's all the positives with very few of the negatives because he gets all the positives of infinite resources on his own. He gets a really good talent roster. And normally, like Kalen DeBoer walks in, sky-high expectations, last dude won half a dozen national championships. The role Elko is inheriting was filled with a guy who, frankly, underachieved, and that was Jimbo Fisher. So you got all the toys you need to play with, and the previous guy didn't get it done. And so now you got a guy who, instead of coaching at A&M, actually gets A&M, and he's immersed himself in A&M. He knows he was there before. He knows which I's need to be dotted, which T's need to be crossed. So I love his entry point there. Now, as for Jedd Fisch, we just talked about Arizona a second ago. Well, Jedd Fisch left Arizona. He went to Washington. I'm not sure immediately in 2024, I'm crazy about the prospect of what Washington could be under Jedd Fisch. Now, 2025, you come back and talk to me, it may sound a lot different. They lost, as you guys well know, all of the starting offense. They lost 20 of 22 starters overall. They're 130th in returning production. Did they add some kids from the portal? Of course they did. They're also joining the Big Ten this year. So let's talk goals. If you're talking about competing for the Big Ten, I don't think they'll do that. If you're trying to make a bowl game, I don't think that's the conversation Washington fans are having, actually. You just played in a national championship a few months ago. So offense is entirely new. Everything's entirely new. Have realistic expectations for them this year. I'm not saying they're falling off a cliff record-wise like TCU did after they played in the title game, but it won't be the easiest thing in the world this year for Jedd Fisch. Down the coast a little ways at UCLA, Deshaun Foster takes over for Chip Kelly. I'm not quite sure I'm feeling the vibe there in 2024 either. They're 91st in returning production, and USC snatched their coordinator defensively across town. So there's also this kind of weird, nebulous, like, what are we? What's our identity? What is UCLA's place in the Big Ten? Because they joined that conference too. And what's the energy, I guess? Like, how motivated are the power players, the deep-pocketed people around the program? You know, the ones who famously apparently couldn't stand Chip Kelly. How motivated are they now? And Jonathan Smith. Now, we were talking about this as a staff. I don't know if I fully believe in putting Jonathan Smith on this list. He's at Michigan State now. He brought over Aiden Childs, who was a former high 4-star quarterback, and he was with him at Oregon State last year, and he comes to Michigan State. I think it may have taken that staff a little while, and is still taking them a little while, to fully get their hands around the portal and how to properly construct an NIL machine and strategy. And that's not an overnight thing, but I think they're committed to doing it. And Michigan State has way more money than most of America realizes they have. But their over-under win total is 5.5. And I think there's probably more than a year's worth of rebuild that has to go on there. The reason that I'm hesitant is because I've seen Jonathan Smith with an undermanned roster before, beating teams he has no business beating, and he was probably not as good at quarterback with those teams as he potentially could be with Childs. So I put him on the list. We'll see. There's the B-roll. If you're listening on podcast, I grew up in the South, so every introductory piece of B-roll that you see of a coach, he's walking around and it's sunny, maybe a jacket on because it's normally January. Jonathan Smith walks out in Spartan Stadium. There's like half a foot of snow. Hey, Coach, welcome in. Then again, we were at an Oregon State game last year, and the weather was abysmal, so he's probably used to it. The state of Oregon is where I want to take you for just a second, and then we're going to bring Brent Pate in. And I, like I've told you with many other coaches on the Pate State Speaker Series, think that you will thoroughly enjoy him, whether you're a Virginia Tech fan or an Oregon State fan, because there is a lot of genuine overarching football talk, philosophically, X's and O's, like all that stuff. So it's going to be really good. We've been taking the mood tracker on different fan bases, and that is basically as we enter and exit spring, how is the middle 80% feeling? Cut off the fringe 10 either way. How's the middle 80% feeling? Oregon fans, I would classify their mood as sort of a head table vibe on two fronts. Number one, they're joining the Big Ten. And there's a lot of talk about where these new programs and these new conferences enter. Are they the fourth best, ninth best? Are they the best? Oregon State is Oregon's a whole lot closer to the top than even the middle of the pack there. They've got the second best odds to win the Big Ten this year, according to our friends over at FanDuel. So the mentality, rightfully so, should be immediately compete for the Big Ten. Immediately certainly contend for an expanded playoff spot. They were already thinking that way last year. But the other part of that is Oregon's not going to be a, hey, let's hope to make the playoff sort of roster and sort of fan base. They're going to be a, we recruit all these guys, we portal in all these guys. We should be making noise in the playoffs, shouldn't we? And yes, you should. Dan Lanning's got the staff he wants. Dan Lanning has got a very, very thorough and proven recruiting and portal strategy in place. They have got a uniquely effective NIL strategy in place. So I'm just going down this list. Very, very engaged and passionate fan base. Probably the most unique branding of any college program in America. It's just check, 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 check. So on this list that it takes to win, allegedly, we got all of them checked. That's no different in the Big Ten. In fact, heard Lanning say this a couple of months ago, or at least I saw him quoted as saying it, and even if it was fake, the fake quote was real. He said something along the lines of, yeah, we may have to adjust to the Big Ten. Big Ten's going to have to adjust to us as well. He's not wrong about that. And if you even look at line of scrimmage talent, that's what separates USC and Oregon at the outset of Big Ten inclusion. You look at USC and know they got a little ways to go in terms of personnel on the lines of scrimmage. Oregon's there. Like, Oregon can compete. They've got the versatility. They got the size and athleticism. They have the depth, specifically on defense, to immediately compete in the Big Ten. They just brought in a couple of high-caliber quarterbacks out of the portal. They filled needs very effectively. And so why wouldn't you view yourself at the head table? We talked about Texas the other day, the mood tracker there, time to eat. We could have used that. It would have been copyright infringement. Texas folks would have gotten mad. We could have used that same mood here. Same vibe from Oregon is the one I get from Texas. Everything you claim you need is in place. It's not a first-year staff or a second-year staff even anymore. New conference for both of them or not. Time to eat. Head table. You can look at those odds on the screen there, or if you're listening on podcast, I told you Oregon's got the second best odds to win the Big Ten. Well, we don't just make those numbers up. Certainly I could. And we do in the fall. But our friends at FanDuel power all of our odds market. They deliver all of our odds to us, and they're going to do a whole lot more than that this fall. But if you're looking for anything, I don't care if you're looking to bet the NCAA tournament, if you're just curious and don't feel like betting a dime, or if you want to go ahead and get down on some futures in college football, national championships, conference predictions, over-under, odds to make or miss the playoff itself, those are all over at FanDuel right now. And like I told you, you don't have to be laying down money every time you go over there. I think it's a great resource to just check out. And so I do it frequently, obviously. So we appreciate them being on board with us, and that's a partnership that will sort of grow and grow as the season goes on. All right. We've been at Virginia Tech all day. In fact, we've been on the road, feels like about 5 years now, the Pate State Speaker Series with full corporate wind in our sails. We're just going anywhere we want. And we wanted to come to Blacksburg, Virginia today. Famously, I have never been here, and I've complained relentlessly about having not been here. Well, we changed all that today, and not only did we change that, the program is in a state of change as well. I think for the better, but I'm going to let you judge. We sat down for an extended conversation with Virginia Tech head coach Brent Pate. Here it is. So you're rolling into a new season here. Just watched practice earlier today in the middle of spring ball. You and I were talking earlier about how when you inherit a job, there's so much on your plate. There's so much noise, and then you start 1-3, and then some of the noise is a little negative, and then you show some promise, and then the preview magazines like you, and then the noise is a little more positive.
You've created some of that.
Well, look, guilty as charged. So when I'm wrong, tell me I'm wrong. But how do you make sure guys realize it's all the same? It's all just noise. Like it doesn't impact what you do on 3rd and 3 on Saturday.
Yeah, I think it's about what you hear a lot of coaches say, trusting the process and make sure that we really do that. That's what we can control is what phase we're in, which for us, winter's phase 1. We don't worry about anything else but our winter program. Spring is phase 2. We don't worry about the winter. We don't worry about summer. Let's win phase 2, and this is how we got to do it. Summer's phase 3, and preseason is phase 4. So we break it down in those phases, and we just say these are the things that we have to do well to win this phase. This is where our efforts go. This is where our attention is. If we don't, it's hard to go on to the next phase and feel good about it. So trusting the process, staying humble, staying hungry, reminding them how we got there, how we moved the needle and became a better team. That we can't lose sight of that. And we've always been grounded in fundamentals and 100 level. So right after the season, it was hit the reset. We're going back to the basics, guys. Winter and spring is about 100 level things that we have to be great at.
When I grew up, Virginia Tech was a national championship contender. And I find sometimes in our college audience, maybe like even the 18 to 30-year-old audience, you have to remind people that is this place at its maximum potential because they've seen it in their adolescent and formative years differently. When you're recruiting guys, how often do you have to sort of press that button on them of, no. When this place is right, take a look at this. Let me hit the rewind button. This has happened here before. It's not just, sunshine and unicorns and stuff. It's actually been real. And then how do you sell them on the idea that we can get back there?
Yeah, I think a couple things. It's a great question. I tell recruits and families all the time that this place was Clemson before Clemson was Clemson. Truly.
Yeah.
And in the same breath, 7 conference championships in about 15 years. 7 conference championships in 15 years. Who does that sound like? Ohio State? Alabama? Like who's winning those kind of league championships that frequently? And that was Virginia Tech. And then the second piece of it is I was here for a Sugar Bowl championship. I was here for an Orange Bowl. I was here for 2 conference championships. So were several members of my staff. We know what it looks like to win championships here. I would never have left Penn State and James Franklin if I didn't believe we could do it here. If alignment wasn't here. If administration and the powers to be didn't recognize what I recognized about things we needed to do to get this program headed back the right direction.
You had opportunities that's pretty well known in the industry and publicly, I guess, kind of well known. You were at Penn State. You had opportunities both at the coordinator and probably the head coach level. You chose this one. Why?
This was right for me. Now, I believe in Virginia Tech. I know what it's about. I cut my teeth here. It was right for me. This was the opportunity where I could be myself. The values and traits that are important to me, I believe are important for Virginia Tech's success. And I know you find them here in our community, on our campus, in athletics, and now you find them with our football team. So a chance to be the head coach and not have to be somebody, that you're not. Pretend to be somebody else or things that aren't important to you needed to be. This was a great fit for me. Recruiting the state, having relationships here, I was excited about what I felt like we needed to do at Virginia Tech. So it was just a great fit.
I was in your office earlier today, and you kind of, you look out, you got one of the greatest views in the sport. You got practice fields, you got Lane Stadium in the background, and you said, that's kind of surreal. Being me, being how I was brought up, being where I'm from, it's surreal that I'm the actual head coach here.
Yeah.
And then I was telling you, well, hey, they pay me to talk about college football. I never thought in a million years that could be possible either. how often do you just kind of find yourself 2 or 3 minutes just drifting off and realizing, whoa, but actually it's real. Like I'm not dreaming of it. It's real. It's really happening.
Honestly, I don't know if the schedule allows for that, but I'm reminded every day I walk in my office because it was Coach Beamer's office. And, the respect and admiration that I have for him and the job that he did here, the impact that he had, not just on this football program, but this athletic department, this university, this community, Southwest Virginia. So that smacks me in the face every day and makes you, you feel an added responsibility, not just to make Coach proud, but everybody that's affiliated with our place. So many great lettermen and great coaches and, the tradition and the history that exists now because of those people. So, but it's surreal for me. I was one of those guys, I didn't come up in the profession, dreaming to be a head coach. You just, came up, directional schools and working your way and living paycheck to paycheck, just like my dad did for most of his career. So, in that sense, it's surreal as well.
When I was talking to guys around the building today, they said, hey, you talking to Coach Pry? Yeah. Make sure you ask him about the stuff on the wall. I say, like, everyone's got stuff on the wall, but ask him about stuff on the wall. So right behind us, it says necessary mentality. What does it mean?
Whew. So to me, you want to be elite in some trait. Like when we're recruiting, when we're developing guys, what is the elite quality that this individual has? And for me, I wasn't very fast, I wasn't big, I wasn't strong, but the mentality piece, that's like a skill. That's like how well do you run? How strong are you? How well do you catch the ball? How well do you throw the ball? Well, how great is your mentality? It's a trait that can contribute and impact what type of player you become. So the necessary mentality, it's a skill that you can control and be great at, and it's not God-given. We can grow that and develop that and nurture that like we do everything else. Running, throwing, catching, blocking, tackling. So that is non-negotiable. I can't say you have to run 4.4, but I can say your mentality has, it has to be what it has to be, right? That's non-negotiable. So it helped me. I think it's one of my better strengths or greater strengths. I've certainly got my fair share of weaknesses, but I think these guys would tell you, the staff and these players, that I'm going to bring the necessary mentality every day. And that can do a lot of good.
You guys were nice enough to let us in team meeting earlier this morning, and most of it is what it is. One part that I do actually want to talk about, though, is there is accountability. There are things written on the wall, but then it's put in practice, even in a team meeting this morning, where you've got every position group, and they're tracking every one of their guys, and when you do something that you should be praised for, you're going to get praised for it, but those red X's are also on the board, and not as a group, but as an individual, you're going to get called out when you don't basically exude this right here, necessary mentality. It probably doesn't take too long for young guys to get called out on that front before they realize this is no fun at all. But is that something you've always done? Have you seen it done elsewhere? And what kind of effect does that have on guys? Because we can't do that in the corporate world. That's called an HR violation. We can't really do that in the corporate world.
So we did do it defensively at Penn State. It was something I started there, and it grew. When I got here, I said we're going to do it with the entire team. When you hold guys accountable or hold people accountable in front of their peers, it's just that much more meaningful, significant. And nobody wants to see those red X's go up on that board in front of 150 people, that you were late to a lift or you got your car booted for parking in a handicapped spot. They want to see extra miles for helping somebody shovel their driveway or leading a class discussion or, helping a teammate out, whatever it is. But to me, everybody always had talked about accountability, and it was how do we really put it into action and make it more meaningful and tangible. So we spend the time once a week in a team meeting setting. We're going to go through each position. And then at the end of the semester, the team with the most accountability points, the unit with the most accountability points, gets a really cool piece of gear, tech hoodie or something, and somewhere on it in big print, it's going to say, "Count on me." because that was the group that could be counted on the most.
A lot of coaches, in fact, most head coaches say there are pieces of being a head coach you can never prepare for until you become a head coach. And you just nodded your head, and you're a couple of years into this now. What were the things that are on your plate now that you never could have prepared for until you just dealt with it?
First, let me say I was very fortunate. First-year head coach Ricky Bussell, went with him to Louisiana Lafayette and kind of by his side through all the learning curve there. And then to go to Georgia Southern with Jeff Monken, another first-time head coach, and to be close to Jeff and go through that experience with him. And then obviously to go with Coach Franklin, with James to Vanderbilt and then Penn State. And to be a close confidant of his and to have the good fortune to learn and grow with him and learn so much from him. So there was a pretty good playbook for me about how I wanted to do this and what I wanted it to look like. NIL and the transfer portal wasn't part of the playbook. There was no chapter in there about those things. So, there's, with everything we do, we're genuine, we're transparent, we hit it head on, we embrace hard conversations here. And that's a lot in that world. Those things I'm talking about, that's how we've handled it. And, so far, we've navigated it pretty good.
How much have you learned about the characteristics you have to look for in other non-football related departments? It all bleeds back into football, but you grow up as a football coach, coaching a position, you probably didn't worry a whole lot about sports science. You probably didn't worry a whole lot about putting nutrition plans together and putting those people in place. So on top of the football pieces, the on-the-field grease board type pieces, how much of a baptism by fire has it been learning about all the other tentacles that extend outward from a program?
Yeah, there's been some learning there, but, again, at Penn State, James really pushed the envelope in all those areas. It was very important to what we were doing. And, so I had experience and had a blueprint of what I felt like we needed to do in those spaces. But, again, you have to rely on your staff. You have to rely on people to give you information that, not that that's going to make your decision about what direction you go with something, but we have a lot of different departments that bring a lot of value and a lot of information, and it's up to me as the leader to take it all in and then make decisions that I feel are in the best interest of everybody. So, we got smart people on this staff that are growing professionally, and there's a lot of outreach, there's a lot of professional development. So we're in those spaces, whether it's analytics, whether it's sports science, and we're continuing to grow it here at Virginia Tech. It certainly wasn't where it needed to be when I was hired. We didn't have a sports science coordinator. Didn't exist here. So there's been 7 or 8 positions we've added over 2.5 years in those areas.
When you take over a program and it doesn't have some of those blanks filled in, does it make you go, oh, that's a shame? Or does it make you excited because with those blanks filled in, I actually know that this place could scale quickly? You guys had several sellouts last year. I mean, you're not in playoff contention, nothing like that, and almost every game over here sold out. So then you ask yourself, well, when we take those next steps, what could it be? But when you inherited the job and you look at it and there's so many incompletes that you would write on your term sheet, what kind of things does that make you feel immediately?
That you can't do them all at once. You want to, because you see them, you recognize them, but that the support from the administration is there, and it is. We're moving in the right direction in a lot of spaces. Maybe not the total move we need to make, but we're getting partway there in a lot of areas, and it's making a difference. It's impacting our program already. So you have a blueprint, you have a map of we need to be here in sports science, we need to be here with nutrition, whether it's budgetary, whether it's staffing, whether it's plan and model that we want, whether it's facilities. And so we think in that space and we have an idea of where things need to go. And then it's support from administration and you continue to sell out the stadium and have people support you and believe in what you're doing. We got tremendous support here, and in the middle of a rebuild. not just from a fan base that, provided 5 sellouts and 25,000 sitting through a rainstorm in the Military Bowl, but the administration, our donor base, our Letterman group, this community, things are in place here for us to move this needle, just every year, just keep moving it the right direction. And we have to do our part. And we got to win enough games to keep people excited. And I think it's also the relationships that we build across the community, across campus. It's the foundation of what we do. We're invested in the state, which was a really important piece to Coach Beamer and their success. Virginia was very good to them. And so.
Talking to some folks who cover recruiting, especially in the Mid-Atlantic region, and talking to some folks who have recruited on other staffs, talk about once upon a time how hard it was to come into Virginia and take a kid. And if you got him, you knew you had a fight on your hands. And then that kind of waned a little bit. And now you guys have come back in the door. And so I know you kind of just touched on it, but one more time for me. This area kind of became a national recruiting hotbed because of maybe the lack of in-state schools holding talent home. You came in with the philosophy of taking care of home, obviously, but how much traction have you seen you guys able to get on that front?
Yeah, I think, we've invested in the state, and the coaches and the communities are recognizing that. We're in the schools every cycle. We're doing travel clinics for the coaches across the state. We're hosting a clinic here for coaches. We're doing 8 or 9 camps. We don't recruit outside of 5 or 6 hours unless we absolutely have to, or there's a Virginia Tech connection that makes sense. We're going to recruit our footprint, so it allows us to really spend the time. Nobody should know more about a kid in the state of Virginia than us. Nobody should know more. We should start hearing and learning about these recruits in 8th grade. Mm-hmm. And what allows us to be in the conversation right now with Georgia or Penn State or Ohio State is the relationship we have. That we should have a better relationship than anybody. And that should, with enough guys, it'll keep us in it till the end. And some of those guys have already elected to come here over schools that maybe are more notable right now.
If you were to go to your Wikipedia page, that thing goes back a little ways. You're looking at your bio, the places you've been, the high school level, the college level, multiple positions and roles. Do you think back to maybe like a few forks in the road or real turning points in your career that you look at and say, I'm here today because of this person or this moment?
So my father was a college and high school coach for 45 years, kind of a journeyman coach. He and I have the distinction, we both coached in a Rose Bowl, and we both lost to USC. So we got that famous photo up at the house. But so obviously his influence, and I grew up. He's coaching small college ball in West Virginia, the back of 10-hour bus rides, going to away games and at practices, and so that's been the most impactful in my life. Obviously, my dad played at Marshall the year after the crash, and just the passion for the game in our family. Both my brothers played college ball, and but then the opportunity to be around just great coaches that were doing it the right way and treating people right, and they weren't putting the wins above treating people right and doing things the right way. Denny Dowds at East Stroudsburg University. Then I have an opportunity to come here, and I've been very fortunate that way. Bud Foster has been a huge influence on me defensively as a coach, but also in development and identifying strengths and weaknesses in personnel and then mentality. A lot of that I learned from Bud and saw the value in it and what it did for us here. But, situations and scenarios, I've been fired twice in this profession. And I'm convinced that how I handled that and the way I navigated that was one of the 2 times where I grew the most. The adversity that this game presents, you have to navigate that well. You got to come out the other side of adversity feeling good about it. And whether it's hard conversations or hard situations. And certainly when you're fired, and when you're fired with family, like a lot of coaches, they've experienced that. You can play the blame game and all this, or you can just put your nose down and work and be appreciative for the opportunity you have, and work to the next one. And so there's all kinds of things that I think shape us as coaches. And they say you're either a coach that's been fired or you're a coach that's going to be fired. So hopefully I've crossed that bridge twice now, so I know.
I'm gonna say something here. I just want you to react when I say it. Allman Brothers.
That's my band.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Those are your guys.
That's my guy. Yeah, I grew up on them in high school, and listening in on my buddies' parents' albums, and making cassette tapes off that stuff. And then I got into going to see them. In the summers, and while I was in college, we would travel and go see those guys. And once you get into a band, you learn about their influences and the old school blues and jazz and everything. That I believe you got to have a balance in this business. It's too hard. I can't be the coach I need to be every day if I don't have some other things that take my mind off of it. And that's one of them. My family, I try and work out when I can, and my music. I love going to live shows, and you just can kind of leave everything else alone for a little bit and have some fun, enjoy yourself, get your mind somewhere else. And then I feel like I'm ready to go, by that next day. So, but yeah, there's not a practice that goes by at Virginia Tech where you don't hear an Allman Brothers song. That's not by accident.
How many times have you had to maybe talk to players, but definitely talk to staffers when they're doing everything they're supposed to, like they're checking all the boxes, but you look at them and you realize there is zero balance in this guy's life, and he may be 31 right now, but he may pay for it when he's 51. Yeah. How often do you have to have that conversation?
A lot. We try, and the culture we work at and want for our staff is as important as the one we establish with our players. And balance is part of that culture. We take half days. They know they walk in my office. They want to, there's a brother graduating. There's a grandmother's retirement. There's, a baby being born. There's a sister's signing day. So whatever it is, I'm going to promote all of that. I want that. That's family. That's part of balance, part of quality of life. And then we have fun as a staff. We work when we need to, and I'm going to make sure. I would hope they would say that Coach is a pretty fun guy, and that we're going to do things together that are fun and more relaxed, because it's hard what we do, especially now.
I wanted to ask you this because I always love getting coaches' perspective. So everybody's got some weird part of this game that fascinates them. Like I love, when we go on the road, I love checking out road locker rooms. I was talking to Shane Beamer about this the other day, and I love seeing how accommodating or unaccommodating those environments are. So it may be that or something completely different for you, but is there anything, maybe from the perspective of a coach it's different, is there anything that you look at and you say, wow, this is not in my day-to-day line of work necessarily, but I'm fascinated by this part of this sport?
There's all kinds of little things that interest me, pregame warm-ups, the differences that you see position coaches doing. You got a corner coach on one team doing it this way, you got a corner coach on another doing it this way. I love walking in a stadium early and just looking around and see what have they done here, like what's been important to them for their atmosphere, their environment in their stadium. I love to come out prior to kickoff, like just prior, when we run out of that tunnel here, and just kind of soak it up for just half a minute. Like, I love to look around and see the crowd, and, I think it helps get me excited, and also just appreciate the opportunity. So, but every place is a little different, and everybody's biased about their own place, but I think we got a great one here.
You got some memorable road places? You coached all over the place. You got some memorable places that, if you were writing sort of the chapter of that in your book, this one, and this one, those really stand out.
Yeah, obviously this atmosphere and the entrance, the two of those things combined. This is a group of fans that stand on their feet the whole game and cheer, and they got their sweatshirts on and blue jeans, and they're very into the ball game. I think the entrance helps do that. But the whiteout at Penn State was awesome. I always loved that experience. That's a special one. I've coached at LSU at night. That's pretty cool too. I think those are the ones that stand out the most to me.
All right, we're going to be cautious with how we talk about this because, yes, I have been sort of bullish on the direction of the team. You're in spring right now, so cautiously, what are you seeing that you like so far? And then just knowing your roster and your guys like you hope you do, what are some things that, if you take care of business, you can be pretty good at this fall?
I think Kyron's doing a really nice job. One of the points of emphasis was just being able to make accurate throws in tight coverage. We did a nice job last year. There was a lot of open receivers. A lot of times he's out of the pocket, but we realized that there's going to be more challenges and tighter coverage and things, and he's done a nice job. He's made some good throws each and every practice that are contested catches. Great job by the wideout, but he's putting that thing where the DB can't get it and the wideout can, and that's growth. I think just our wide receiver room just continues to develop. Coach Mind has done a great job with that group from top to bottom. The development, the recruitment to it, the mindset. I think what Coach Price has done with our defensive line, going from one of the worst teams in the league at rushing the quarterback to finishing number 2 in top 10 nationally. But we still have room for improvement there to be the type of defense that we need to be at Virginia Tech. When I was here, we led the country in sacks. When I was at Penn State, we led the country in sacks twice. Like this scheme and what we're about, TFLs and sacks. And then we have to minimize explosives. That's an area that hurt us defensively last year. We could make the TFL, the minus yardage plays, but then give up a big one, a run or throw. We've got to be better there. So we're talking a lot about that. But probably the biggest thing is we've got all these really good players that were productive starters that return. Right? We have a bunch of guys come back that what you're going to get for the most part when you put them out there. But then we have this whole second rung of guys, first and second year players that are going to contribute, whether they get elevated into a starting role or they have significant snaps or they're on special teams. We're going to need that group. And that group, this offseason is critical for them.
You mentioned sacks just a second ago. All right, so let me get a grizzled defensive veteran's opinion on this. Tackles for loss and sacks, those are very, very front-facing stats. My mom could track those. So then you get the more advanced analytics crowd and a lot of coaches who will say, well, sacks aren't all that important, and I know what people are saying when they say that. However, I've never seen a quarterback get sacked for positive yardage. So it is very nice to get the quarterback on the ground. Literally nothing good's happening for that guy when he's on the ground. And it is, while not the end-all, be-all, a great metric that defense just did something really well. It's great to pressure him, but it's great to get him on the ground as well. So when someone talks about sacks, when you talk about sacks, are you of the overrated stat, or are you, we want as many of these as we can possibly get?
That's a great question. And sacks are important to me because they're minus yardage plays and they're hits on the quarterback, on the guy that's going to touch the ball every snap. When you sack the quarterback, you got a chance to, you're messing him up, right? You're banging him up. You're getting good hits on him. You got a chance for sack fumbles. I mean, that guy touches the ball. If you can get him rattled, if you can get that decision maker, you're worried about that rush. But also, I've been around games and I've been around units that did a tremendous job of pressuring the quarterback and getting the ball out. didn't have the sack numbers, but man, you felt great about what they were able to accomplish and how they affected the game. We had a first-round draft pick at Penn State, Jason Oweh. His last year, he didn't have the sack numbers, but I think he led the country in quarterback pressures. So those things are valuable too.
I was just wondering because I've gone all the way around the merry-go-round on that.
Yeah, what's honestly more important to me, because we were this way for a few years in my career. We were getting sacks and TFLs, but we were giving up big plays all the time. Somebody's band was playing. And you're not going to sustain success or really be a genuinely good defense that way. And so that's when we started rolling in our explosive play goal. We want to be top 10 in fewest explosive plays, coupled with top 10 in sacks or top 10 in TFLs. If you do that, that's a pretty good sign.
All right, so we talked about what could be good in this fall. Kind of wrap it up with this. Sometimes there's maybe one thing in bright red Sharpie. We know we got to get better at this or we're going to sink completely. So it could be that or a number of things, and it could be for you personally or the team, but what has your focus? What keeps you up a little bit at night of we got to get better here. We got to make sure we take care of this.
I think it's depth, to be honest. That's the first thing that comes to mind. We've signed a bunch of high school players over the last couple of years. We've only gone these last 2 years to the portal for 12 total players. So there's development and growth in first and second year players that has to happen. There's going to be injuries. We're going to need reps from other guys besides this core group. So developing those guys, which thankfully it's still the spring, right? You got all the rest of spring, you got all summer, you got preseason camp. We got to make sure as coaches that the snaps and the reps are going where they need to for the most part to develop those guys. But the big thing for us, and we will here towards the end of spring, we'll do it in preseason camp, we have to play complementary ball. We're not going to have an offense that is just going to beat the brakes off everybody every week, and it doesn't matter what defense and special teams do. We're not going to have a defense that just has 4 shutouts and 2 yards of carry, and we're not going to have a kicking game with 6 returns. And we are a complementary group, and that's kind of the formula for us right now. And I'm great with that, but we got to make sure we can do that. When we didn't last year, we weren't able to win the game. When we relied too much on one phase, we couldn't win the game. So we are a complementary group, and so we're constantly talking and working at ways for our team to understand that. That means responding when one unit may be struggling, another unit can pick it up. It means that unit, putting them in those situations where things maybe aren't going well. How do we get out of this? So, complementary ball, I think, has always been a part of it at Virginia Tech, and it feels like when you look back on last season, we were at our best when we were doing that.
Brent Pride, this has been a fun day, man.
Awesome, brother. Glad you've been here.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
Big thanks to Brent Pry and the entire staff here at Virginia Tech. It's been basically home for us all day. The eggs in the cafeteria were phenomenal. I'm getting tacit agreement from just off camera. The Pate State Speaker Series has been on the road for a couple of weeks now. This was a first-time stop. North Carolina yesterday was a first-time stop. These have been really great conversations we've been able to have on cam. The off-cam stuff has been just as interesting. In time, I'll give you guys whatever stories that I can give you. There's a lot of behind-the-scenes material over on the Instagram page, for example, at Late Kick Josh. Just make sure you're following on all the platforms. We do not have a show Sunday. It is Easter. We will be live next Tuesday from a location that I'll reveal probably sometime in the next few days. We got 3 more big ones to knock down next week, and we are very much looking forward to that. Until then, for our entire crew here on the road, our crew making it possible technically down in Fort Lauderdale, I'm Josh Pate. Take care. Have a great Easter weekend, and God bless.